Take a look at this behind me. These are the M1A2 Abrams tanks. It's the most recent variant, the newest variant, just off the General Dynamics production line. They got their start in the 1980s. They've been pulled out of storage, they've been stripped down to the hull, and then packed with electronics, new capabilities to make them more lethal, new armor. This is a process from contract to delivery that takes about 12 months at a cost of up to $12 million per tank. Now, just a few years ago, this wasn't happening in a meaningful way. As recently as 2016, production here was averaging about 1 tank per month, largely for international customers, but now the U.S. Army is buying more, allies are buying more, and General Dynamics is now expecting to be producing up to 34 tanks a month as soon as next year.
Since 1980, the tank has been one of our franchise programs. It's a significant piece of our overall production. We have production on the tank, we have production on Strikers, and a few other vehicles that we're doing. It's a pretty significant portion of our business.
Now, just last week on the earnings call, General Dynamics noted that it had $1 billion in tank orders, expects demand to continue. Now, this is also where the company with the Army is building Stryker vehicles, as well as developing a prototype for a next-gen vehicle, the Mobile Protected Firepower, in a competition against BAE as well. But if this is good news for GD, it's great news for jobs. 3 years ago, you had about 300 workers here in this facility. Today, that is doubled. And next year, as production ramps up, General Dynamics expects that to grow to nearly 1,000 workers. That is significant for a town like Lima, Ohio. Population 38,000. It's a manufacturing town that's been impacted over the decades. They've lost about 8,800 defense industry jobs alone since the mid-1990s. And of course, worth noting, it's in a key swing state that did vote for President Trump during the 2016 election. So this is really a military modernization story. It's also a manufacturing story, and it is a people story. And in terms of the people part of the story, the stakes really couldn't be greater.
I tell folks I take this personal because not only was I a soldier, I have sons who are soldiers, and luckily they've all come back from Afghanistan and Iraq safely. But everybody in this facility and everybody that works for me understands the end game. And that end game is soldiers will die if we make mistakes.
And guys, of his sons that are serving currently in the military, 2 of them are, in fact, tank operators.
Morgan, thanks. And it strikes me that there's been a lot of talk over the past few years about modernization of the military, lighter forces, not using as many tanks. So I wonder, is there an ecosystem growing around Lima, Ohio, in terms of components or technology manufacturing jobs that are applicable beyond just tanks? Or is this really tank specific?
Well, this facility, so this facility has been operating for quite some time, but it's been making the tanks here since the 1980s. As I mentioned, it also makes those Stryker combat vehicles, working on next generation prototypes as well for the U.S. Army. It's really interesting because these tanks, they're covered in armor, they can move very fast, they can move up to 42 miles per hour, but they have the equivalent of miles and miles of wiring and electronics inside of them. They have to be fortified from a cyber perspective as well. So in general, yes, everything's becoming much more advanced and much more technological.
Morgan, what's it like to be inside one of these things?
It is cool. I actually took a test drive a little bit earlier this morning. 2-mile track that's just outside of here. It's a little cold outside. It was 17 degrees, feels like 0. And then as you can see here, we were moving up to 40 miles per hour. And we actually, you can see that hump behind, it's a 60-degree angle. We went up there and tested the brakes as well. You're moving. And we went over bumps. It was very smooth. The U.S. Army calls this the Cadillac of combat vehicles, and having just been in one, I can understand why. 70 tons. That's how much one of these weighs.